So I started with the bone and clavicle पर पहला pelluch bone clavicle છે upper limb में. It's a long bone, atypical, which means it is an exception, full of exceptions. Uh, for instance, it has no medullary cavity from the beginning. It has two primary centers of ossification. Both develop in the intrauterine life at 4 to 5 weeks of intrauterine life. Furthermore, this is the medial end and the lateral end. We are looking at the superior aspect right now, not from the inferior aspect. It is the only long bone which is oriented in a horizontal manner, so that's again an exception. I mentioned no medullary cavity. It has dual origin. That means the medial end actually ossifies via endochondral ossification, whereas the lateral end it will ossify via mesenchymal. So let's just mark in the key first. Clavicle actually literally means key in Latin, that is. So we'll be starting with this, the medial end, the lateral end. This is the anterior end, and this one would be then the posterior. Obviously, this axis would obviously be superior, and the downright bottom would be inferior. I hate my camera quality, but cool. Common misconception. इतना नहीं लागे. It's actually like this, somewhat like this. The lateral end connected to the acromion process of the scapula. The medial end right here connected with the manobriosternal, forming the manobriosternal clavicular joint. This is a common misconception. Always the anatomical position as such, not as such, but as such. Right? A little bit oblique. So yeah. Simply in BDC it was given, and it's really very confusing, but now you can easily determine given the accurate positions, right? So the anterior aspect which we are talking about right here, like this, from this plane, it is, as you can see, it is concave forward, and the posterior end is convex forward, right? For the lateral end. For the medial end, it's convex forward and concave backwards, right? So coming with that, certain peculiarities from the superior inferior aspect, the lateral end is flattened, whereas the medial end is quadrilateral, right? Now, certain key aspects, the shaft is in particular has been divided into two parts, that is the lateral 1/3 and the medial 2/3. Coming towards the lateral 1/3, the superior part, right? The superior part is actually intradermal, indicating that it is relatively smooth than the inferior aspect. Coming towards the inferior aspect, the main peculiarity you can see is a elevation. The tuberosity is the conoid tuberosity, right? Just laterally moving forward again, you find the trapezial ridge. The trapezial ridge and the conoid process together, they connect with the coracoid process of scapula, forming the Coracoclavicular ligament. It's a via ligamentous joint. It's a key joint. It's important for transmission of weight from the appendicular skeleton to the axial. I should have mentioned this earlier, but this is actually the right clavicle, as you can see. Coming towards the lateral end, yet again, the superior aspect is clean, smooth, quite smooth. Coming to the inferior aspect, you can find grooves, subclavian grooves right there, marked with the blue. Ignore the green, it's actually a, a ligament. We'll be talking about it later onwards. But the blue has been marked off as a subclavian groove. The lateral aspect from the medial side, the subclavian groove lies in the medial segment, but the lateral aspect of it, marked with dark blue right here, marks the nutrient foramen. Enters obliquely. It has no medullary cavity, so it won't be supplying to any medullary cavity. But yeah, inserts medially, divides rapidly, then spreads out to the medial end towards the lateral end. Talking about the connectivity, we have seen it like as an oblique as an oblique orientation. And then the lateral end comes on the scapula with the acromion process, and again the sternum, manobriosternum to be precise. So we'll be marking off the attachment sites of certain common muscles which are usually arising here. Coming back to the superior aspect, it's a very important aspect for superior point perspective. The posterior end of the lateral side, the posterior end of the lateral clavicle has the attachment for trapezius. The anterior end of the lateral side of the clavicle has an attachment site for deltoid. Coming towards the medial end, the posterior side for the medial end has an attachment site for sternocleidomastoid. Sternocleidomastoid is a very important muscle. Forced inspiration is caused by sternocleidomastoid. It's basically nomenclatured after the site of attachments. Sterno as in the sternum, cleido as in the clavicle, and mastoid as in the mastoid process of the mandible. So in forced inspiration, it really helps you out. Coming back to the posterior end of the clavicle's medial side, you have the attachment for pectoralis major, the wing muscle, and it assists in the movement of the shoulder. In which particular axis? Anterior, posterior. Winging is what it's called. So the basics have been cleared so far. We will be coming back to the ligaments later on. Just for a simple hint, the green marked here is, you have already guessed it, we have already said this thing earlier, that's the Coraco-clavicular ligament, which transmits the weight from the appendicular skeleton to the axial skeleton. Right. So transmission of weight is quite important right here. The blue segment right here once again is the sternoclavicular ligament. Again, not quite important, but for transmission of weight, once again, the ligaments are mainly for transmission of ligaments. Not quite as important as muscles, but yes, definitely important for stability. Identification is quite simple. You can now easily determine which one is the lateral. The flattened end superior inferiorly would be the lateral end, and the quadrilateral end would always be the medial one. Medial also contains a groove right here as a socket. Doesn't mean much, just for connectivity with the manubrium, nothing more, nothing less. And right here, if you can see at the lateral perspective, if I could just, this groove is the Acromion groove for connectivity with the acromion process. Right. So that's pretty much it for clavicle.